Man, I can't wait to go to FNM tomorrow. I'm going to get to play my favorite cards, Thoughtseize and Asmarino Martikadai Stundakaldakar. Are you kidding me? Man, Modern's awesome. Now I just gotta add the rest of these copies. Maybe I'll add something else later. But for now, I'll just... Oh, who's that? Must be one of my friends trying to ask me when I'm... When building a deck, what do you usually start with? A game plan? A favorite card? The ability to deal with a deck you don't like? All of these are valid reasons to make a deck. If you aim to win a match in whatever game you're playing, some of these options will be more successful than others. In this episode of Philosophy in Games, I would like to talk about what goes into building a deck. What is a game plan? And is winning the only thing that matters? The answer to these may seem obvious to some, but part of philosophy is being malleable in your understanding, and critical of not only others' knowledge, but also your own. So without further ado, let's get into... To start, you have to know what you want to do. Is your plan to resolve big cards and beat your opponent down? Deny your opponent's ability to play? Kill your opponent before they do much of anything? Or play efficient cards on each turn? These are just classic strategies that are usually relevant in most card games. I'll talk some more advanced, complicated, different options later on, but for now, I'll focus on these. If you're playing a ramp deck, you may be inclined to play cards that generate additional spendable resources, whether that be mana, ink, or resources, very creative name by the way, Flesh and Blood, to make one big game-winning play. Examples of these are not hard to come by at all. In fact, almost every TCG I have ever played has at least one big idiot who could easily facilitate a ramp strategy. Now, the astute of you may have noticed a problem with this. What if your opponent just kills the big idiot? Well, yeah, this is the problem. Once a ramp deck has fulfilled its purpose, you'll find yourself starved of resources and options. That's why successful variants of this strategy typically ramp into difficult to deal with creatures, or ones that get immediate value, so when it dies, its job is already done. Who could it be at this hour? It's 11 p.m. Who could be at the... Ah, yes. Control. Yeah, sure, you can put your feet up on the table. Not that I can do anything about it. What beats the deck that resolves one big card? The deck that doesn't allow you to resolve that card to begin with. Though control can present itself in many ways, the goal is usually the same. Run your opponent out of resources and kill them with some devastating threat. But wait, if the end goal of a control deck is to make a big guy, and the end goal of a ramp deck is to make a big guy, then why don't you just play a control deck? Well, the main difference here is a concept from earlier. What turn do you want the game to be over with? Ramp will often try to win on a much earlier turn than their control counterparts, but if thwarted in their plan, can lose to a stiff breeze. However, control decks rarely run out of cards and show their power through their resilience and ability to adapt in most situations. One thing any control player fears: a ferocious and crazy bunch who care only about taking lives and dealing damage. Aggro, short for aggressive, is the act of throwing cards at your opponent close to the speed of sound, until achieving whatever your game of choice uses to determine a winner. There are a few ways to accomplish this. Attacking with little lads every turn just so happens to be the most popular representation. It may seem odd, but I would also lump burn into this category. Burn is a term that is unique to life-based systems, so for anyone who has only ever played Pokemon, where burn effects are close to non-existent, you may be unfamiliar. When I say burn, I mean a card that deals damage to an opponent without using combat, or a board state. Aggro and burn usually have a similar problem to ramp. If they don't win once their strategy is done, they lose. Well, why does aggro deal with control whereas ramp dies to it? The answer is simple: tempo. What is tempo, you might ask? Tempo is the rate at which you play cards in relation to the turn you're on. Ramp will play one card a turn to get its big guy, Control will play maybe one card a turn, usually preserving its resources, and Aggro will usually play 2 to 3 cards in a turn, overwhelming its opponents in cardboard. Just look at how much damage Martin Dang was able to do to Shota in the time that it took me just to describe what Aggro is. Shota's at 8. That's a 12-point life swing in what was essentially 1 minute. What if we took a middling approach, though? What if we went full mid-range? Easily my favorite of the classic archetypes, is often categorized with the potential to do massive damage with the propensity to deal with threats and push advantage. Often, mid-range decks will eke out their advantage through multiple matches. They do not have the best matchups in the world, but usually have the highest average win rate into anything in the meta at the time. A mid-range deck may even look like something known as a good stuff pile. Decks constructed entirely of the best cards from each other archetype, being able to push through control and ramp some of the time, and being big enough that creatures run by aggro decks die for free. Why does mid-range not just destroy every TCG that it's in? Why even play the other options if mid-range plays the best cards? Well, the issue comes from something we haven't touched on yet, and is very important at this point of discussion: synergy and combos. An inconspicuous card with an effect that appears useless can be a ballistic missile in a deck built around it, or a set of cards or effects can build upon each other until a winning board state naturally presents itself to you. This is where you get game-specific archetypes, like Reanimator, a deck that tries to bring a large lad back from the discard pile, usually at the cost of life. Stun, a deck that attempts to use walls to prevent your opponent from properly playing their strategy until they naturally run out of cards.
He's good. He knows every aspect of this game. But my grandpa put all his gaming knowledge, his whole heart, into assembling this deck. I have to believe that it holds some secret strategy. This card is useless.
Or evergreen archetypes, like the one simply named Combo, the epitome of this section. Combo decks use specific combinations of cards that together provide devastating winning strategies. Midrange struggles in this regard, as its play pattern being both proactive and reactive rarely gives room for synergies and combos to flourish within its deck lists. This is where I would like to introduce the first quote of the episode. A quote by one of the greatest card game content creators and multi-Magic the Gathering Pro Tour winner, Brian Kibler. The number one rule of building a good deck is to have a powerful, proactive game plan. A proactive game plan boils down to a way to win while interacting with your opponent. Removal spells, creatures, counter spells, all fantastic options for interacting with your opponent and pushing into a board that allows you to win. Kibler also poses a critical word here: powerful. Your deck could have synergy coming out of its ears, or a combo that could easily win if assembled. But when does this happen? And how does it stack up to the turn other decks are planning on ending the game? In other words, what are your deck's rate of play? I'm not sure if this is the typical turn of phrase, but I feel it nicely encompasses what I want to talk about in this section. If you want your deck to have a fast rate of play, then you should include a lower average cost of cards in your deck. Another term that is used for this is your deck's curve, a term most commonly used in Hearthstone and Magic, which comes from the charts used in online deck building, representing a natural bell curve. This may not always be the case, however. Sometimes your curve can look like a staircase, or even a flat line. The most important aspects of your curve are entirely based on when you want to play your most powerful cards, and how you are planning on ending the game. This may be your curve if you're building a control deck, but if you're building an aggro deck, then this might be more accurate. All of this hinges on one very important detail. Are you even trying to win at all? In fact, let's take a step back for a minute and look at the other side of the proverbial coin. What if the goal of your deck isn't to win? This may seem counterintuitive, But with the rise of multiplayer formats like Magic the Gathering's Commander, and even Lorcana, it was built around the idea of multiplayer formats. Deck strategies that don't plan on winning are rather popular. Group hug is a term many people are familiar with, and the reception to hearing that term will be radically different depending on the listener. However, their position in multiplayer formats is undeniable at this point. The way group hug decks work usually sticks to a general rule: give the other players enough resources so that everyone gets to play cards. Other decks that may fall into this category by accident are stall decks, found in games like Pokemon. Sure, they're meant to win in the most technical sense, but the primary strategy of stall decks is actually to tie. Get one win in the first game by decking your opponent out, then take the second game to time, making the match one win in one draw, which in Pokemon provides the stall deck with a win for the match. The last non-winning archetype I would like to talk about is Turbo Draw. I'm not sure how else to describe it, but the main goal of this deck is to draw every time it plays. Decks like Yu-Gi-Oh's Self-Destruct Button Turbo, or Commander decks in Magic built around Divine Intervention, plan to lock their opponents in perpetual play, since draws never advance the match until at least one player has a win. Why would someone want to build a deck like this, though? I mean, only one of these examples could win even if they wanted to, and isn't winning the entire reason for playing? The short answer to this is no. And this is where I'm going to get a little off script here, because I had a whole thing about philosophy written before and a quote from a philosopher that I liked, but I felt that it was a bit too preachy. I felt that I was kind of belittling my own point. So what I'm going to say here is, play what makes you happy. That's really the point of this video. You should play what makes you happy, and you shouldn't let other people dictate what is and is not fun for you. Because we play this game, we play any game that we play, to step away from social expectations. So why is it that there is somehow a new social expectation whenever you sit down with your friends or other people who just like to play card games on what is and is not acceptable? If you want to play stacks, play stacks. If you want to remove all of your opponent's lands, remove all of your opponent's lands. If you want to make 1 billion mana for everyone but you, go for it. All of these are valid reasons to play the game, as long as you are having fun. I hope this ending bit doesn't sound awful in comparison, but I felt like this was a better end to the video, even though it is going to make the video shorter. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and I hope you have a wonderful day.